Hey folks, welcome to CTF Radio. I'm Adam D, and I have with me Zardus. Zardus, you want to say hi?
Hey everybody,
Awesome. And so we have
how's it going?
a very special guest today and a super fun episode. And what we've kind of been thinking about, we've been talking a lot to various people that are, teams or people that are directly involved in CTFs that play capture the flag games as a team. And so kind of, Jan, when we talked about what is CTF, we kind of outlined this kind of different structures of CTF. Could you briefly maybe describe us what does the layout, the landscape of CTF look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So when kind of the typical hacker hears about CTF, they think about a room with tables set up and people at these tables hacking, right? And this is what you see at events, not just DEF CON, HitCon, a lot of these sort of live events. A typical hacker might also instead think of the CTFD interface, right? Where there's a bunch of challenges and teams competing. And so these are, live team events. There's a live in-person team event, a live online team event. There's also a style of basically CTF-like thing called a war game, right? Which is for individuals to practice. So you go to something like pwnable.kr, and there is a website of a list of challenges and a leaderboard on individuals who have solved what challenge, and you click on the challenge and you solve it, and it's offline. There are usually dozens of challenges, and you roll through it over a long period of time, building your skill. So there's something missing, and it's the team or the individual based online event, and our amazing guest today is actually, as we'll talk about, filled that gap. So today we'll be talking about an event that is for individuals live, and specifically you take. Well, should we talk about it with the?
Yeah, let's bring it in. So we
awesome
have Carl, a.k.a. ZetaTwo. You may know him on Twitter or on YouTube as ZetaTwo. So Carl, welcome to the show. We're super happy to have you on today.
How's it going, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Of course. Yeah, we're very happy to have you on. So can you, maybe before we jump into kind of this nice teaser that Jan made about different styles of CTF, maybe you can give the folks some of your background, So specifically, we always like to ask people, how they got into CTFs and security. So maybe we can start there, and you can kind of tell us kind of where you are now and those kinds of things.
Yeah, sure. So I think I got into security relatively late. I've been programming since I was like 7 years old or something like that. Making games, making websites.
What were you programming on?
Can
you tell us?
So, okay, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I think I started learning C++ when I was like 7.
Amazing.
However, that was kind of difficult, and at some point I transitioned over to like making websites with PHP with a friend, and also did some like game programming in C# as well. That was basically the original reason I kind of got into programming. Was like I like playing video games. I basically asked my dad, like, how do I make a video game? And my dad is a doctor. He had no idea, but he went to the bookstore or something, and he brought home a book of C++ programming or something like that.
Amazing. Yeah, I have a video game programming in C++ book too that I did. Mine was in high school, so it was much later, like 14, 15, and I made a Tetris game that was really terrible following that book, but man.
I have a Linux SDL programming book also in C, and it was... I used that to teach my brother for our school project how to make 4-player Pong. That's my key achievement, I think, in life probably.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started with there, and then how did that progress? So you started as kind of actually, and I think that's a good point. I mean, I think a lot of people get interested in either programming. I mean, me specifically, I was exactly the same way. I loved video games. I wanted to make video games. And so that's what I learned first. Programming was, I think actually games on my calculator was the first thing, like a TI-83, and then graduated to more advanced things. So, okay, so take us along with your journey.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to say that those game programming efforts were not extremely successful, but I learned stuff along the way. The website programming part was much more successful. Me and my friend, we had like a small company. We were like making small like personal
Amazing.
websites and blogs and stuff for some non-profits and small businesses and stuff like that. People who don't really need to go to like the real pros to make websites. They just need something simple to get going. And at some point, I started university, studied here in Stockholm at the technical university here, and I actually studied engineering physics and like not computer science, which I was like choosing between the two, but decided on engineering physics. And at the time, I was still not really into security. Like, occasionally you would see some article about something security related, and that sounded cool and stuff. But it wasn't really like an actual interest of mine. I was still on thinking, that I would go on and do stuff with like artificial intelligence or something along those lines. But then at some point, I'm not exactly sure in what order it happened, but for my master's I went with computer science and did an exchange semester at the EPFL in Switzerland, and there I took a class in computer security and cryptography, and I was immediately hooked. Like this, it was so interesting, and there was like kind of this like lab course together with the computer security course, which was essentially that every Friday afternoon they would release what is essentially a set of CTF challenges, and the way they graded this, because in the beginning it was like, okay, if you solve all challenges you will get the highest grade, but then after a while they came back and like, okay, the faculty or whatever, they've told us that we can't give everyone the highest grade, so basically the one who solves them first will get the highest grade. Sorry. So basically every Friday afternoon turned into like a CTF competition. That was fun. And then, I continued like my studies there. And at some point I did start playing a few, the occasional CTF and a little bit of wargaming, like overthewire.org. I did some stuff there. And... but it was still like I didn't really have anyone to play with. Like none of my friends were into this, and so it was still just like a little bit. And then at some point, right before I graduated, I was applying for a job, and I applied to this like security consulting company. And basically, as their kind of like technical test for the interview, they were like, "Have you heard about this site, overthewire.org?" And so basically, the hiring process was to solve the NATAS challenges at Over the Wire, which is the web category of challenges there. And I was like, I've actually already done all of those. And they were like, awesome. We also have this CTF team called Hacking for Soju. And we are playing this CTF next weekend, which was the qualifiers for the CodeGate CTF. So why don't you join us? So basically, my interview for this job was to play the CodeGate qualifiers with Hacking for Soju.
Amazing.
And that then led to both being like recruited into the team and getting the job. So that's like how I started.
Double whammy.
Very cool.
Yeah, he knows it's a good interview when they're like, could you do these things? And you're like, oh, I've already done all of them. Oh, that's great. Okay, so then that's kind of how you got. Wow, that's really cool. So that's how you got started in the CTFs, and then how did that kind of develop? Maybe could you take us to where you are today?
Yeah, exactly. So this was so I started my master's in 2013, graduated 15, and got this job. And so for the past 5 years or so, played a lot of CTFs with Hacking for Soju. And we did qualify to some on-site events. Like this team is roughly 10 years old or so by the time. So, I mean, I joined when it was already like a fair, decently established team with some like really, really skilled players who have been part of this.
Which probably helped a lot as
a
new player, right? Getting up to speed and
oh,
working
definitely. Definitely. I mean, I learned so much from my teammates that I played with, and that was a very important part of learning stuff. Because I mean, okay, I did take this one security course at university and one cryptography course, but other than that, it was mostly like general computer science, like algorithms, distributed systems, and so on. So I often say, when people ask me about like, where did I learn about security and so on, I say that, like 70 to 80% of my like technical security skills comes from playing CTFs. So we just, kept playing for a bunch of years, online events, on-site events, and so on. Yeah. So
that's great.
This is what I tell my students a lot. They ask, what classes should I take to learn to hack or, to be a security professional? I tell them, listen, you should take the security classes, but that's not sufficient. I don't know of like any university or any educational program that'll just take you all the way through. You need to dive into CTF.
And I think from an educational perspective, it's almost impossible to develop a curriculum that can take you up to the forefront, right? I mean, really, you want to convey the concepts and the way of thinking about these problems, right? Looking at things in an adversarial mindset, figuring out that you can break things. I think that's one of the first exciting things for students is seeing that these security things are actually possible, right? Like that rush you get when you first, get a SQL injection or whatever on a website, like you can see like, oh my gosh, I have so much power, right? Figuring out that that's a thing and then kind of setting them on the path, because there has to be a lot of kind of self-learning because the field just changes so much. I mean, I'm sure, Carl, you can attest, web security when you first started in CTFs is way different than it is now.
Yeah, no, and so that's definitely true. And I would say I'm fairly like broad in my interests and skill, but I would say that like my primary field within like this in the classical like CTF split of things would be like reverse engineering. And for a long time, I still felt like okay, I mean reverse engineering is my thing, but I still keep up with with most of the web stuff. But in the past maybe 2 years or so, like with all of these like client-side attacks, which have become, it's not just like regular simple XSS, which just like immediately executes some code. It's like this weird complex change of like DOM XSS things and like manipulating strange objects and all that. So like I'm at the point where I no longer feel that I'm keeping up with the web side.
Yeah, it is crazy. I started, actually, a lot of my programming is actually very similar to yours. I started with websites, like in college, with like writing PHP websites, and I was a subcontractor for a friend making a JavaScript widget that would rotate an image. That was like the first paid programming job I had. And and then, thinking about the web challenges and how they've evolved since then. I mean, it is honestly crazy to try to keep up with all of that. Especially as it moves to the client, and now you have browsers and browser security and how browser engines work and execute JavaScript and all that fun stuff. Cool.
Yeah. Also, I mean, this thing about like using CTF as a teaching tool. I think at least I don't know. I mean about the rest of the world, but at least like in Sweden, where I live, there basically hasn't really been any way to get any kind of like formal education in the security field. Like even if you wanted to go to university or something and study security, like there were no courses, there were no programs you could apply to. I mean, like okay, you would go into computer security, and then out of your how many semesters you would have like one or maybe two courses related to security, but that was mostly like some requirement course that all computer science students had to take, where you would go through just the very, very basic, like this is a SQL injection, like this is, something like that. And then that was it. So I think the CTF has really filled this gap that has been.
Yeah, it's interesting also because it's a crowdsourced filling of this gap, right? So you would think that if you try to crowdsource an educational curriculum, the result would be a disaster. But
that's not to say
CTF
that it's
actually
perfect.
That's right. It's not perfect, but it's surprisingly good because how it evolves, all the incentives the incentive structure keeps it on the very, very, very cutting edge, where the organizers have interests, right? And there are many organizers, many interests, many themes that emerge. I've been super impressed. I mean, obviously, that's how I, more or less got into state and security. Really state and security. But, yeah, it's very hard to mirror that with a course. The other thing is, building a course is an insane amount of work, right? And so
for context, for people who are watching, far in the future, we're in, what is it, week 8 of a
9, I think, yeah.
9 of
the semester.
What is it, fall 2020 semester, and Jan is once again revamping all of his Pwny college levels and changing them and figuring out how to fit everything within a given time period without killing all of the students with work.
Yeah, exactly. And this is an enormous amount of work, and I can see why curriculums tend to be, like you said, very overview. This is a SQL injection, and so because to really dig into the realities and the nuts and bolts of SQL injections and different injections and so forth, you need to write probably dozens of challenges, and you have to carefully think, okay, what is the new concept here, the new concept here? It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as that changes, you need to constantly evolve. So if you have a, crowd of people building up, that's probably seems to be a good route.
And that's the very tricky thing, I think, about even with CTFs, right? That's because I was kind of joking, like, they do fill a huge need, and like Jan said, they are great, but for a beginner, oftentimes, especially a top CTF, is insanely frustrating and demoralizing because you spend, you don't make any progress because things are so complex and you don't know all those things. But the thing that we always like to say is, yes, that is definitely true, but if you know that going in and you come with an open mind, and either you work with somebody on your team who's more advanced so that you could learn from them how to do it, or you try a bunch of challenges and then read all the write-ups afterwards, that really helps accelerate your learning in security.
Well, I think an interesting thing is, we often say this and kind of accept it as the reality. All three of us on this podcast right now all started out in a class that had a CTF challenges as CTF style challenges as its evaluation metric, right? And carefully designed CTF challenges. So, Carl, you started out, in that EPFL class, right? Adam, you started out with Giovanni's class at UCSB. I started out at RPI, right? In all of our classes, we had this challenge-based component. I think that prepares you. It's hard to overstate the preparation that gives you into CTF, even if it's a small amount, but it's critical, right? You at least get used to looking at something and panicking, not knowing, like, how the hell am I going to solve this?
Or one of my favorite ones is working on one of Giovanni's grad classes challenge, and I'm like at the computer, I'm like, okay, God, it's so late, I just gotta go to sleep. I like go lie in bed, I'm there for like 10 or 20 minutes, and like boom, an idea pops in my head, and I'm just like jump up and go back to the computer to try something else. Like, it's
Yeah, been there. I think as recent as last week, I was doing the flare-on reverse engineering challenges, and I was working on the last problem, and I was in the very familiar CTF situation of it was like fairly late in the evening, I don't know, 11 something, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just gonna look a little bit at this next step, and then I'll go to bed. And then suddenly you look at the clock, it's like, okay, since when is it 5 a.m.? And then, okay, I'm like, okay, I have to stop. I really have to stop. I'm working tomorrow. Go to bed. And then like, okay, I just need to get it like up from bed again. Do the thing. It works. And then like, okay, now I really need to stop. I'll continue tomorrow. And then go to bed again at like, 5:40 in the morning or something to then have to go up and work. So that's maybe not the most healthy way of approaching it, but if you do this often enough, this will probably happen.
Exactly. That's a great example. I love that. Awesome. So then maybe you can take us to current day. So I noticed the shirt that you're wearing is very cool. So can you tell us more about there we go, the NorseCode team, and how you kind of went from Hacking for Soju to NorseCode? And I know there's some relationship there, but you can definitely tell it better than I can. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we, as Hacking for Soju, we have been in the DEF CON finals, not by ourselves previously, but a couple of years ago, we have been doing collaborations. I think one year we did something with Hacking for Soju and like RPI Sec and some Koreans, and so different collaborations, but fairly small. Like one team, two teams maybe, or maybe three, 2.5 team or something like that. Unfortunately, I never played myself because I was busy at those times and so on. And of course, I've had this idea I want to play in the DEF CON finals because, I mean, it's like the big event of the year. And I think maybe since like 1 or maybe 2 years back, we started to see, maybe it's been going on for even longer, but we started to see these like larger collaborations, like coalitions of teams. We had the whole Sauercloud, the whole German teams, and the Hackeroni, like the whole Italian thing, and there was like the French also did like a coalition thing. We started seeing these like big coalitions of teams, and I thought about that, and I thought about like the CTF scene in Scandinavia, which well, we can come back to that, but it has been historically very weak, with exceptions such as Hacking for Soju and like Gallop Sled from Denmark, which you all know from the Pwn tools. But apart from that, is like there is, since like before a few years ago, there was no CTF scene in Scandinavia essentially. Anyway, that is a little bit better now, and so there are a few like university teams and so on, and we can actually, there's like some interesting history there as well. But anyway, we had this idea. Okay, let's make a Scandinavian CTF coalition team for the DEF CON CTF. So it was in the beginning of the year. Reached out to some. We had been making some relationships with a Norwegian team called Bootplug, and and some other Swedish student teams and so on. So we put this thing together with the goals of, it was kind of like a project with the goals of like playing the DEF CON qualifiers, qualify for the finals, and play the DEF CON finals together. So I think we did like 2 practice CTFs together in like February and March, and then we played the qualifiers this spring. And I remember distinctively us starting out very poorly in the first this was the 48-hour qualifiers,
48
right?
hours,
yeah. So I think in the first, I don't know, like 16 hours or something like that, we barely scored anything. Maybe we had 1 easy flag or something like that. So I was like, okay, I mean, damn, it was too difficult. We didn't have the skilled people and so on. I went to bed at some point, and then I woke up, and some other like heroes in the team, they like had stayed up all night and just crunched, and we were suddenly at like 20th or something place. So it's like, okay, this is doable. We can do this. So we all like got this like energy going, and started helping each other, and it was good collaboration. And then finally we did manage to end up in something like 9th place, if I remember correctly, which did qualify us for the finals. So
yeah, that was great. I'm actually looking at the scoreboard here on my screen while you were talking. Yeah, you guys got 8th, which was amazing in quals. Yeah. And I think you had first blood on the bike coding golf challenge, which was super cool to see. We were very worried, and so we were very happy to see your solution pop up.
Yeah, that's always great when you're a challenge author and you have a challenge which I mean, you think it should be solvable, and you think it's like not too outrageously difficult, but you don't know it until it's out.
Especially these crazy golf challenges. I feel like that was another one where it's because we had theories, right? Like you said, it's like, okay, I know this is definitely possible. This is definitely possible. 3 or 4 is theoretically possible from what I've seen of it, but I haven't put it together yet. And there's a bunch of smart people out there. I'm sure somebody will figure it out. And when they do, it's like, oh, thank God. Okay, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and figuring out that point decay. So for those that actually are wondering what a golf challenge is, DEF CON 2020, which is DEF CON 28, had a new style of challenges in the qualifiers, which is a challenge that would degrade in difficulty until someone solved it. So it would start out at a difficulty level that was insanely high, and then we had a slow decay. So in this case, it was a polyglot byte coding where you had to write byte code that would be valid in Python, Perl, Haskell, a bunch of other languages. And the question was, how many byte code, entries could you create that work together or worked in all of these languages? Wait, was Haskell one of them? Does Haskell have bytecode? No.
I did not work on this challenge. I do not remember the details.
And I wrote it, and I don't remember the details, but it definitely.
There were a bunch of languages at least, and we had some people on the team working on it, and they.
Yeah, so it's Java, Python 3, Python 2, Ruby, Lua, Node.js, OCaml, and eLisp. So OCaml.
OCaml. Okay, I confused it. Yeah, Haskell's compiled. Anyway, so the point is, of course, why would you want to keep it hard for your opponents? Why do you want to solve it early? So that they can't solve it and it's worth more points.
Exactly. So there's like a
And
super interesting game theory
one,
element there, right? So it's like it rewards you for putting the time in, because if you're the first one, then you peg that difficulty level high, and so your opponents then have to match you. It has like weird kind of similarities to sports events, or like, I don't know, high bar or other types of things where you have to like jump over something, and so like if you set the bar very high, literally, right, other people can't make it.
Yeah, and I think this.
Oh, go ahead, Carl.
This solves a little bit of the. So I mean, nowadays the dynamic scoring is pretty much the standard for the CTFs. But before, when there was a static scoring, a lot of competitions would have like a first blood bonus, where you would get just a little bit extra points if you were among the first few teams to solve it. And then with dynamic scoring, that didn't really make sense anymore, so that has been basically removed, and then this is kind of like brings that racing element back a little bit, or like this, there's value to be put in that extra effort to be the first, or to be a little bit better. I think so. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, actually, and this
the racing element.
I was just gonna say, this actually leads us into a nice racing element. We can, I guess, go backwards in time to 2019, when, well, from our perspective, we're preparing for DEF CON quals in 2019, and I'll tell it from my perspective first, so I can. We've been kicking around this idea of doing some kind of racing speed thing for DEF CON quals, and I've tried to like re-piece together the timeline, and I can't really do it because nothing really makes sense anymore, but. I think right around the time either we were doing that or I had just started, I saw Pwny Racing come through on Twitter, and I was like, oh no, they're doing like exactly what we want to do. And I'm like, but no, that's great. Like that's like it's amazing to see, people think similarly. So I think we talked about it a little bit in one of the previous podcasts, but we ended up having in that quals a speed run style of challenge, which kind of similarly to golf is like challenging people to work quickly and to reward people who can do things faster. So maybe Carl, you can talk about from your perspective. So you like, how did Pwny Racing come about? What was the genesis there?
Yeah, so I think it started, we were at the CCC in 2018. So this is, since CCC is between Christmas and New Year's. So the very end of 2018. It was, late night at CCC, and we were a bunch of CTF players, and we were just, talking about various things. And I think because this is not the first time this thing has happened, there was, I think it was at the DEF CON.
Yeah.
Was it part of the
Live.
DEF CON finals? Yeah. And then as well, there was this event called like Rapid Fire or something by Jordan, Cyphertex, and some of the Vector 35 people. I think they organized. It was another similar thing. So there had been something like this before, and we were talking about this, and it's like, oh, that was like such a great idea. Why isn't there anything like that, still going on? And then like, okay, we should do it. And so I talked to some of my teammates in Hacking for Soju, and one of my teammates, Bob, was a big factor in this. And so we basically got some people together, and so there was also this thing that Murmus CTF, so another member of the community who has a YouTube channel, he had been doing this. He did this like challenge where he challenged a bunch of stream. So I had been streaming a little bit on YouTube, like live solving challenges and stuff, just a little bit. And there's some other famous security YouTubers, and he basically gave everyone the same challenge, and challenged us to like solve it on camera, and without looking at each other's stream and so on. So. I was already in like a channel with him and some other people, so I could like source participants from there, and then so we got this thing together, and we got it going, and people seemed to like it, so we continued doing it throughout 2019. I think we did 11 real episodes, so roughly once a month, and finishing, actually that was pretty cool. The last one we did was the episode 11, was back at CCC 2019.
Nice.
We did like an on-site episode where they had to. So it was all pwnables in all of the episodes. But for this one, they were doing AVR pwnables with actual. They each had like an Arduino Nano, which they had to hack, and we were like sitting there on site next to each other and commentating and so on. And they also did like a special episode, like a collaboration with Seesaw. So this was also like with not me as a commentator, but instead with Jordan and Rusty and Josh from also like the Vector 35 people. They did like a whole thing during Seesaw. There was like a big a knockout tournament with the speed challenges like this, but it was like broadcasted under the like Pwny Racing brand. If you want.
That's cool
as well.
So it's growing beyond you, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, so we did this throughout 2019, and we haven't released more episodes since. I hope to bring it back because people seem to like it, and people have been asking, when is it coming back? So there is definitely an ambition to bring it back again. We'll see when that happens, but it would be cool to bring it back.
Yeah, it's tough to keep these events going. I think, especially, it's a reflection of how much our field changes, right? And how people will participate in CTFs for 5 years, move on, etc. Right? So as people cycle through, keeping an event like that going takes an enormous amount of.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it, right? You just had 11 episodes. That means you had to write or co-write at least 11 challenges, right? And so because that's, part of what we think about is organizing CTFs, which this is a very similar style of thing. You're developing this challenge. It should have one bug. What kind of goes through your mind when you're trying to develop these challenges, and what maybe difficulty level are you trying to shoot for?
Yeah, so as I said, I did this in like collaboration with some of my teammates, and basically the way we divided this. So my teammate Bob, he basically wrote all of the challenges except for the last one, which was another teammate called Lars, and so he was kind of responsible for like creating the challenge, and my responsibility was like the production side of like all the streaming and being kind of like a show host and so on. But generally, the idea was because we wanted episodes that were reasonable to watch within some reasonable amount of time. So I think the goal was like 60 to 90 minutes to solve it, which means that for Pwnable it has to be fairly simple. But still, we had some really skilled people on some of these episodes, so it can't be just like your intro pwnable, your
which was
things that you would have,
which
like,
was exactly what we had for speed runs. Like that was our, those were done in 5 minutes, which doesn't make for a great video for you. You're just getting into commentating, and then they've solved it, right?
Yeah. So many of those, many of the challenges, they revolved around some tricks, some maybe like a bit of special things, things like jumping between 32 and 64-bit x86 code, and things like utilizing initialized memory and like controlling initialized memory, which would then lead to like control and so on. So it was like not really the things you would find, like if you would go through some kind of like I don't know, pwnable basics course, you would have your buffer overflow, you would talk about your stack cookies and ROP and so on. So we'd try to be like something that was like a little bit different from that, some extra little thing. You have to know that actually in libc, in this place here, they actually store a reference to this thing which you need to do and so on. So it was like these tricks, basically. It was a lot about that. I think that was kind of something that we did. And then for the final one with the AVR, it was we would try to utilize the fact that it uses like an embedded system. So it was related to how the memory layout works in a system like that, and so on. Because I think it's like when you choose to create a challenge in a different architecture, for example, it's not really super fun if you just take your like ordinary x86 challenge and you just straight up port it to another architecture just to make it a little bit unfamiliar. I mean, you can do that, but it's really great if you actually use the interesting properties of this architecture or system as part of the
so that way they have to learn something new about that architecture or system that they didn't know before. But there is, I think, something nice, and I was watching that episode before we recorded this, so I thought the other interesting thing with at least moving to an architecture like that, you kind of boiled down the hacking more to its essence, right? Especially if there's a little bit less tooling, you still want some stuff, right? You want them to be able to debug things, you want them to be able to disassemble it, but do we really does everyone need an awesome decompiler that just works right off the bat and you just smash F5 on everything? It's like, no, it's kind of nice to have to actually look at the assembly and see what's going on.
So one of my favorite CTF challenges was like this sort of embedded crazy thing. It was an MSP 430 device that Legit BS built for DEF CON, I don't remember, probably 2015. Probably, and they built this device with a radio running, some firmware, and I think it was a MIPS device running an MSP 430 softcore, something like that. And reversing that firmware was an incredible experience because it was an architecture I wasn't familiar with, and there was no like semantic, there wasn't a libc or library function that you could really identify and so forth. You have to really figure it out. This is what the code is doing. It was reversing at its core. Like Adam said, just by shifting those assumptions, you can often just say, okay, this is a concept. Let's see your mastery of it, not your mastery of specific implementations of it. For my class, I created for my reversing challenges, I created a VM architecture for them to reverse the VM of, and then reverse the code inside, because I wanted to have some, this sort of knowledge transfer inside their brain developed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's really cool when you do that, and when you do that a lot, when you get to this level where, when you're reversing things and you're not really, you're no longer reading individual instructions, but you're kind of like seeing the overall structure of the program, and you can like start to transfer these concepts between specific architectures or specific tools and so on. So that's.
And I forget, is AVR the one that has the registers memory mapped somewhere?
I think so, yes. And it also has this like hybrid. It's like an 8-bit, 16-bit hybrid thing. Yeah. You have these like registers you have 16-bit registers, which consists of like pairs of 8-bit registers and a bunch of other strange things going on as well. So.
That's so cool. So I have a...
And
go
like
ahead, please.
I don't know, sorry.
I was just going to switch topics just a little bit. I'm curious, you know, obviously it's still on the same topic, but you're one of the very few, I would say handful of people who've actually done the crazy job of commentating live hacking competitions. So can you talk to us about like, what's that like? And it seems almost a Herculean task to be able to like watch what somebody else is doing. And even just if you take just one person, right? You watch just what one person is doing to be able to interpret that, because you have to kind of put yourself in their mind and talk about them. So you have to understand what they're doing, but you have to do it across 4 people, right? Or however many people are participating in this. So can you talk to us about from the commentating side? Because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, no, and actually, in a sense, having 4 participants is actually, in a sense, easier because it gives you an out.
I see.
So you're watching these people, and they are streaming their desktops. So you see the output of their thinking, but you can't read their minds. So you don't know, like, if they are looking, for example, they are reverse engineering the code, and they are looking at the code, and sometimes maybe they're even like, because some of these players were kind of like very aware of the fact that they were being recorded, so sometimes they would like highlight text on screen to like kind of signal some, you know, and some people would not do that at all. They would just, you know, pretend that they were just working on their own. But even if they were like looking at, they were maybe like staring straight at the bug, and then it's like, you know, does this mean they're just like, you know, taking a small pause or whatever, or have they discovered it? Like, should I as a commentator now say like, oh, it really looks like they've found the bug here, and now it's, you know, they should move on to the exploitation? Or is it like, oh, you know, maybe they have it, maybe they don't? So that's difficult. And of course it helps with having, you know, with having experience with this yourself, but it's still very difficult. And this is kind of where having 4 participants really helps, because if it's something you don't really understand, or something going on one participant's screen, you can just switch over to another participant's screen, and maybe there is something that's more clear. Maybe they are just, you know, running it in the debugger, and you see that they are doing some very specific thing, like maybe they're looking at some specific offset or something, and you can just try to describe the process. Because the whole commentating thing, I mean, there are kind of a few different things you're doing. One part is kind of like just narrating what they're doing. Just describe for the viewer, like, okay, they're opening up GDB, they are running the program, they're setting breakpoints here. Just explain like a play-by-play, essentially. And then, of course, some of it is more like, you know, you just disregard at all what's going on the screen, and you just talk to your like co-commentator, or, you know, just explain like, okay, today they will be solving a challenge that is about this and this, and they might encounter some issues with this and this, and then there's this trick that they have to know about. You just describe it in a more like just overview sense. And then at some points, you know, you may be talking about where they would go next, or maybe talk about some specific technique they're using. It's like someone is writing like a script and using maybe Pwn tools, for example, which a lot of people do, and you would just, you know, go on a little bit of a tangent about that and explain, okay, so they're using Pwn tools, which is this really great tool that you should check out, and then they're actually specifically using the you know, format string module of Pwn tools or something, and then you would explain like, oh, personally I haven't had like great experience with that module, but sometimes when it works, it's really convenient, and you know, and tell some like anecdotes and stuff like that. So there are like the different things to switch between, like different modes of talking, but it is exhausting.
I think that in the video game world, they often take when neither player is doing something they can directly comment on. They start talking amongst themselves, the casters, right? I think that's a huge advantage of having multiple people, where if something stalls out, you switch to the other player, they're not doing anything interesting either, then you just start talking about, you know, oh, these two have a really interesting hit. But it's hard to monologue on that.
And it's not like a sports. It's not like professional sports. You can just throw to commercial and just like have a break.
We're bored now.
Exactly, a minute and 30 seconds, and then the action's heating up. Let's go back and like.
Yeah, and I've definitely experienced this when I've been doing. So I've been doing a little bit of like outside of Pwny Racing, and before that, and also after that, I've been doing some like just live streaming where I'm basically. Usually what I do is I pick a CTF challenge that I haven't solved, and I go in like without any prior knowledge about the challenge, and I try to solve it on stream and just like explaining what I'm thinking about. But of course, I mean, as you know, when solving CTF challenges, sometimes you just hit this blank and you just like, you have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea what you're looking at. It just stops. But you can't just go silent. Because then you have absolutely no content at all. There's like nothing going on the screen, and you're not saying anything, and that's not good. That's not a good watching experience. So you just have to keep talking about something.
Yeah, I found the same thing when I tried to do that with some Pwnable.kr challenges of like a live walkthrough. I wasn't streaming at the time, so there were a few challenges where I would just like pause the recording and like I have to just read things for like 2 hours and just like keep reading until I like find something that gets me unstuck a little bit, and then I can come back and re-record it. Yeah, that's a super interesting thing. Yeah, because sometimes it's just like, you just sit there and think. And I think some of these, I hope what people get out of that and learn from these kind of live walkthroughs is that I think it's one of the worst things about write-ups. So I think CTF write-ups are super important because they show, somebody who has absolutely no idea how to solve this problem. But if you read those write-ups, you think, these people are gods. How could I ever, they just did X, Y, and Z, like you said about the, crazy web stuff where I clobbered this DOM object and I overwrote this property, which caused this thing and this other thing to do. And then I opened up this iframe with this stuff. And you look at that and you're just like, this is insane. How, they're so good. But actually, as you know, behind the scenes, you don't see all the dead ends that people went through until they finally found that thing that worked. And so that's what I love these live hack-throughs is because they're much more honest, I feel like, about the hacking process, about you get stuck and you're just sitting there looking at your computer for like a few hours, or you go walk away and do something else for a while, right?
Yeah. And this actually relates basically directly to my current work. So in July, I joined Google in their offensive security team, so the internal red team.
Congratulations! Very cool.
And thank you. And in the first few weeks, there was like we have a bunch of like red team exercises running in parallel, like small project groups, and there was like a batch of exercises wrapping up, so they were doing presentations on them. And in these presentations, it's always like we did bam, bam, bam. We got here, lateral movement to here, pwned this, got the stuff, boom, done. And it's the exact same thing as the CTF write-ups. Like what you don't immediately think about is like, okay, this took like maybe 4 highly skilled people, 3 months of full-time work to do this, and they're just summarizing it in like a 20 minutes presentation. So it's the same thing. And this was the idea behind the streams. I just thought like, okay, write-ups are good, but you want to see that, or like it's useful to see this other thing where you have all the dead ends, because that's also where you learn a lot of stuff. Because I think sometimes it's almost a bit dishonest when you have like, and then this, you put in this specific exact number here, and that will corrupt this memory here. Yeah. It's like, okay, but
how did you
come up with that specific number? You didn't just like conjure it out of thin air. Like you had a method of finding this out.
Yeah, that's great.
And you probably did it wrong a couple of times.
100%. Or you miscalculated some numbers and then you were broken or like on the PPP episode, we talked to PPP. They had this beautiful framework, this whole machine learning thing to solve dropship AI. And then they had a bug in their commands, like into the mappings. And it's just like this simple bug that happens all the time. And nobody writes that in their write-up. That like, yes, we spent 6 hours on this and had to throw out the very first step because the first step had a bug. And when we rewrote that, everything worked, right? Nobody ever writes about that.
Yeah,
I ran into this recently in my class. I mentioned I wrote a VM, and some people, it's a tough problem. Some of my students had trouble approaching it. So after the deadline of that homework, where they could still submit it for half credit, I asked the captain of Shellfish to go through and live stream or live record himself solving it, no editing, right, just from scratch. And I made it a little harder for him. I told him in my class there's an easy click to open up Binary Ninja Cloud, and I told him use the same tools the students will use.
Yeah.
And that recording was 5.5 hours from someone that plays CTFs every weekend. It's not easy sometimes, even in like class challenges that are not, ostensibly speaking, so difficult.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a middle ground there. I mean, I found this exact same thing when I was doing some of those Pwnable.kr challenges. It's like the 4th or 5th challenge, but I'm a web guy. I mean, background's on web, and so, I'm not a pro pwner, but, I can fumble around. I can solve these things, but yeah, it's like 3 hours of me doing this, getting stuck, going in another direction, and it's like, is that really useful for people? I mean, I think it is. Like, I think the people who do watch it will get something out of it, but I wonder if there's a kind of, maybe we can try to shoot for this happy medium, right? But then the problem is, who wants to edit a 5-hour video or 3-hour video?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think also the ideal format would be, you record like a blind solve, 4 hours of footage, and then you edit it down, or maybe even do something like where you have like a blog post with, a couple of embedded clips where, here's some text explaining stuff, and then there's here's 15 minutes of me trying to actually execute this in the debugger and talking over it or something. But then you get into this, that takes a huge amount of effort to make that good. So
yeah, exactly. And people don't understand. I mean, I know you definitely understand, Carl, and even, me editing this podcast is a huge pain in my butt, and I'm constantly getting better, but it's like, I know it's not perfect, and I'm just going to do what I can to get it out as easy and quickly as possible.
I think at the end of the day, it's a very important thing to balance this sort of perfection of editing, perfection of recording, and with sustainability, right? If Adam spent a week editing every podcast, or if I spent, weeks editing every video for Pwn College, it would just not be sustainable. And so, some people have to suffer with you staring at the screen like, I have no idea what's going on right now. Why is this drop chain not working? And that's fine.
Yeah. And that's, that's how it will have to be until, I don't know, someone comes along and employs you full time to do that or something.
Exactly.
But if we're doing this in this capacity, or people are doing this, in their spare time, or maybe just as a side gig or whatever, there will be restriction on the production quality and
yeah,
efforts.
for sure. I 100% agree. So then I kind of like to circle back a little bit to what we talked about a little bit in the beginning, right? We talked about getting into CTFs and kind of education. So Carl, can you talk a little bit about how have you seen? So I mean, obviously you've clearly watched every Pwny Racing episode, right? by construction. And so what do you think that people are learning from these episodes? And maybe specifically you can talk, what did you yourself learn from, because I think it's a fascinating view into another hacker's kind of their environments, their workflow, what have you learned from that?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to see. There was one clear difference in when doing these Pwnables, that there was a different focus on static analysis and dynamic analysis between the players, and this is definitely something I knew that different people prefer different things. For example, I tend to go a little bit too much towards the static analysis when I should have pulled out the debugger earlier. But it's really interesting to see did they actually. Some people started out with running the program. Some people directly opened it in IDA or Binary Ninja or whichever tool they were using. there were also differences in like how quickly did you go into like how fast did you start writing a script to do stuff for you. Like some people would start out by like playing around with the program and typing some inputs manually, like doing some kind of like testing on their own. And some people, they would not send a single byte to the binary without having it in like a pwnable script or something like that. So there were like differences in technique there, which was very interesting to see. But on the other hand, there was like a lot of similarities. Like all these skilled people, they did similar thing. They had their reverse engineering tools. They did script, even if they started out like a little bit exploratory, they did script stuff. They were using like tools in some kind of structured way. Yeah, and of course there were some differences. We had some person writing their Pwn scripts in PHP, which is one of the
fascinating.
One of the French CTF players. He basically has a
wow.
Pwnable-like framework that he has written in PHP, and it's like it's not standard, but it works for him, and he knows how to work with that. And to do good stuff, and then that's what matters, right? So
I used to have something like that in Bash. It was a really bad idea.
Of course you did, Jan. I'm not surprised. You have an insane love affair with Bash. That is.
Part of it still survives, actually. It's a shell coding helper. I just exported that part for my students.
Yeah, and then of course you get to see crazy things like when Jinmo was on one of the episodes, and I typically started out all the episodes by going around doing like 1-2 minutes on each participants, like starting, okay, this we'll see like which reverse engineering tool are they using, and just go around and just look at all the participants. And with that episode, like for most of the episodes, we did go on for like 90 minutes or even 2 hours or so. And for that episode, it was like, by the time I did like one lap around, he was like halfway through writing the exploit. I was like, what's going on here? It's just unreal skills. But of course, then we had to stress to the viewers that this is not your average CTF player. Like this is you should not be afraid that you have to be this good or something. Like you can be on your own level. You can start out. Everyone starts out somewhere, but you can reach this level if you put in the time and
exactly.
energy.
That's a great point, right? And I think that's something we try to stress. It's very similar to sports or something like that. If you don't look at an Olympic athlete and watch them run and then just be like, well, I'm never going to try running ever again because I'm clearly not that fast. It's like, of course you're not. You haven't been training your entire life for this one thing, right? Of course they're insanely fast. These are the fastest people in the entire world. But that doesn't mean you can't get off your couch and go run for a little bit, or with a dedicated training regimen and putting in the time and the effort, you can get close to that level.
Yeah, and it becomes useful and enjoyable way before reaching, like, you don't have to be at that level to have this thing be a good thing for you. Still.
Exactly.
Like, you don't have to be the best in the world. Well, you're never going to be the best in the world, most likely. But that's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point. There's a lot to be gained on I think the pursuit or the path is the real outcome, and where you learn and grow a lot, rather than saying like, oh, I'm the best in the world. Or, I mean, if you are, that's fantastic and good for you. And I don't know how you prove that necessarily. I guess what you do is you start like your own CTF team that's just you, and you're better than everyone else on the planet. That'd be a good way to do it. But besides that, yeah, I think, and there's a lot of other things you can do, like bring in new people, mentor new people. Like Jan said, there's this real big, I see it as a problem in CTF of people kind of burning out after 4 or 5 years. And so, one way to address that is, I guess, keep getting in new blood every year or so.
Yeah. So I tried doing it. So I mentioned earlier that the Scandinavian CTF scene was basically non-existent. And I did, for a couple of years, I ran like a CTF workshop at my university. So it was like one evening a week for like 2 hours. It would start out by like me giving like a small presentation, like 20 minutes about some security or like CTF related thing, like, you know, here is how a SQL injection works, or here is how like a basic buffer overflow works or something. And then we would work on like Pico CTF problems for 1.5 hours and so on. So this kind of helped starting a CTF team at my university. So that some of the people in that kind of like workshop thing, they went on and then like started the CTF team there. And then there were a few. We organized some competition for high schoolers, and did a few other things. There were some other people who did you know, some efforts and so on. And eventually there started to pop up a couple of different CTF teams. So now we are at the position where many of the larger like technical colleges and universities in Sweden are starting to get like their own CTF teams and so on. So it's a very, very nice to see that development. And this is why it was even possible to do this NorseCode thing in the first place. Like if we would have tried to do NorseCode 4 years ago, then it would have been us and maybe the few people in maybe Gallupsled who were still active or something. I don't know. There would have been nothing to build from.
Right, and that's, you know, I think it's super important, I think, for community building and going forward and kind of growing. Like, how do we get more people into CTFs? I think that's, you know, super, very important things that you're doing there to try to bring more people in, not just as a, you know, a selfish thing for NorseCode, but I think it's a good thing for the community at large. People always talk about the fact that security professionals, there's a huge lack of security professionals. I've seen statistics about like a negative unemployment rate where like companies can't hire enough. And it's because, you know, and I think CTFs offer a great way to get people into security and get hooked on that notion that they can then bring that adversarial mindset to other aspects of security, whether it's pen testing or something completely different.
Well, and similar to that, I mean, it's or another point of CTFs is it's concrete, quantifiable success, right? So you can say, hey, you know, this is my CTF time, you know, profile for my team, et cetera, et cetera.
Have you found it a challenge to?
Also,
sorry. I was just going to ask if you found it a challenge to kind of maintain communication on a super team or a.
Yes, it was. So, I think I vastly underestimated the challenges of running or like, you know, organizing a team like this. Well, I think I didn't really like estimate anything, which might have been the issue. There wasn't much planning. It was like, okay, what if we get a bunch of teams together and we play the DEF CON CTF? That was as far as the, you know, idea went. And you start bringing these teams together, and, you know, people have different ways of collaborating within their teams. They use different tools, like different chat platforms, different ways of like distributing and communicating work. And you had to, and also there's also the social aspect. Like most teams, at least of a, you know, a smaller size, have some kind of, you know, they know each other to some degree. I mean, of course, this varies a lot from teams to team, but then you bring in these people most of these people are basically complete strangers to each other. And then it's like, okay, you know, how does that impact the like collaboration and communications? And also, of course, you know, when you're talking online and chatting, a lot of like the nuance of you know, communications might get lost, and combine that with maybe like a stressful setting, or so there's also, you know, all of these challenges. And I think in the end, I mean, not that everyone was actually active, but at some point we had like 70 people in this in what in the end ended up being a Discord server.
Right.
So that was another thing. We were first using Mattermost, and some people didn't like that, and there was this big discussion about this, and there's like, you know, a lot of things along the way. But anyway, we had like 70 people. Now, in the end, I think maybe 30 something people were actually kind of playing. And one reason for this was, of course, like for a lot of these teams, as I said, these teams are fairly new. There are a lot of beginners. DEF CON CTF is maybe not, the most beginner-friendly context. So it was, especially the finals, which was, I really liked the challenges, but for some of the people who were playing, it was like, they're like, okay, there's nothing really I can contribute to, but have fun and so on. But
yeah, I think it's an important point that people on the outside underestimate, right? They see like, oh, this team has 80 people, or I've heard numbers of 200 people on a team, and it's like, personally, I think of it as the shellfish model, because when I was playing as shellfish, we were kind of always very chaotic and organic as a group. Like we almost, circa like a 2010-ish time frame, we were never like driven. We're just like, here's what's going on. We were pretty good at developing like an architecture so that you could play, access the challenges, whatever, especially for finals. But there was nobody directing like who did what. It was very much an organic thing where
chaos.
Yeah, chaos. I think that's, but part of me as a hacker, I kind of like it's almost like a nice, hacker way of like approaching these challenges, right? It's like, yeah, you just kind of hack on stuff, but we never won, and I think part of it is very clearly because we weren't, regimented. We weren't even, I think so. It's something that definitely I think people who want to, like, especially like you said with the rise of these kind of big super teams, I think that's maybe why you see them not propagate very long unless they actually have a dedicated kind of captain or structure who's willing to devote the time and energy necessary to create that team cohesion, boost morale, get people working together beforehand so that they are not just thrown into a room and been like, black box pwn this machine learning challenge, so that they could actually, work on those things.
Yeah. No, but we did actually make some efforts there.
Awesome.
We created, so we tried to create a bunch of tooling throughout the summer to prepare, and so we had these, of course, like exploit runners and like some task management system, and for that, then we also created this kind of like dashboard for the team, where you could also like set your own status. So there would be like a matrix with like all the people and all the challenges, and then for each challenge there would also be like subtasks, like are you working on like reverse engineering or like writing an exploit or patching or whatever. So you could like put yourself in this matrix, and everyone else who would be like, who would look at this dashboard would see. And we had one team member who was because basically he realized that his area of expertise was not really relevant for the DEF CON finals, so he instead like took it upon himself to be more of like a manager person. So he was like, checking in with people, like, okay, so are you still working on this, and maybe could someone go help this other person with this thing.
Awesome.
and so on. So that was absolutely very helpful. And another thing that was really great was that we managed to get a little bit of a sponsorship from the Swedish Signals Intelligence Agency. So they got us. We rented a like a conference place essentially. So we had this huge conference room, and a lot of people came to Stockholm. So not the whole team, but we were maybe like 20-25 people in this like conference location for like the whole weekend, and like ordered food together and sitting together and hacking. And we had the like this dashboard thing on a projector, and sometimes we switched to having the Dropship AI visualizations on the projector as well. So that was overall just a very good. We did perform okay, and especially since like we had a lot of beginners and so on. So we were happy with that. But it was also just a great like community event, I think, and like getting all these people from these different teams to meet and then talk to each other and collaborate on problems and so on. We even had some people who took like the overnight train from Denmark up to Stockholm to play with us in Stockholm. So that was really
that's
cool.
awesome. And I think that's something that was at least definitely on the organizer side, we noticed that was severely lacking this year, was not being in person, right? Our entire team was remote, and it's just rough to do 48 hours of hacking if you're not there physically with people. I think we've already mentioned we had people that went to bed and we couldn't wake them up to launch their challenge because they were asleep, and we didn't have a good, I keep calling them, but there's not much I can do. I can't reach over to them and just like shake them awake, which is what literally we've had to do sometimes during DEF CON. Somebody's asleep on a couch, wake that person up because there's a problem with their challenge.
Hand them a laptop.
Yes, exactly. And they start typing and everything goes good. No, but you guys did great. I mean, I think part of it is if you make it to DEF CON finals, I think that's already very awesome. And you guys were 10th, which was very cool. So top 10, of all these people, and there's great teams here. So I think and this was your first time playing as a big team in DEF CON finals, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us had actually played in the DEF CON finals before. And we were basically saying, I mean, of course we wanted to perform as good as possible, but realistically, we were talking about it would be good if we could get the top half. That was like some kind of like realistic goal. And I think at some point we were up at like 8th or 9th place or something, but then towards the end we fell off a little bit and then ended up in 10th place. But it was still it was not at all something to be ashamed of. I think we felt good about that. So yeah.
I think it's important, like Adam said. I mean, these every team on there, are made of incredible hackers that you see at Pwny Racing. That they're Olympians, right?
Yeah.
At the Olympics of hacking, in some sense. I had a friend that went to the actual Olympics, where you don't have to say the Olympics of blah, right? They went to the actual Olympics to throw javelin, and he didn't get a medal, but he was at the Olympics, right? That's when I was playing, also obviously with Shellfish, our goal was always let's make it there and have fun, and do awesome stuff and see what happens. I think it's a good way of approaching it, as well.
Especially like as a big team, first time. I mean, that lays the groundwork and the foundation, right, for the team that next year. And I think there's going to be a benefit to participating multiple times year over year, not just in and obviously when the organizers change, I think that becomes less relevant, but as organizers, we can't change everything all the time. Like that's just not something that makes sense. So if you already had you had this dashboard, right, but if you had been competing for a few years, you probably would have already had a dashboard, so you could work on other parts of your infrastructure that get better and better over time. So
yeah, and we also realized that some of the challenges we had were maybe not the challenges we had anticipated.
Right.
So maybe, the way we designed because we were not able to build every communication or collaboration feature that we could think of, we had to kind of find a subset of tools that we could reasonably build. So maybe, for if we do this again, we would know that, okay, but, actually it would have been really helpful if we were able to do this thing while working on the problems and so on. So, yeah.
So what is next?
Yeah, we'll see. I think the consensus from the people who participated afterwards was this was fun. NorseCode will not be like a team which competes in all regular CTFs. We still have our own individual teams who will continue to play in regular CTFs. We talked about keeping it for all attack and defense CTFs. So there were discussions just recently. There was the Hackeroni had a AD defense just recently. Unfortunately, nothing really came of that, so I don't think we actually played. But those were the discussion. And then, of course, next year we'll see if we do this again for DEF CON next year. And I think everyone liked it, and we want to do it again. But there were of course challenges, and it was a little bit exhausting for people involved. So. The ambition is to come back next year and play in the qualifiers. And, we'll see what happens, basically.
Very cool. Awesome. So, any other topics or anything you want to talk about? Anything we didn't cover that you're dying to get out there to the people?
So there's this. I mean, related to the pony racing thing. We're doing this thing with Google, so we're hosting this competition called Hackcelerate, which is Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll have to credit someone who came up with it. But yeah, anyway, I think it's slightly inspired by Pwny Racing, but also from like regular like game speedrunning events. Things like Games Done Quick and stuff like that. So it's we took the top 16 teams with some replacement, I think, from the Google CTF, and they are competing in this competition. So they were like four matches of 4 teams, and they're doing this thing where they're playing this game that we have created, and also so they're doing like game hacking challenges, but also mixed in there are like regular CTF challenges. So occasionally they will like be stopped in their game progress and like, now you have to solve this CTF challenge. And so like, and we streamed this, and then commentary similar to like Pwny Racing, and then the winners of each match went on to finals.
Awesome.
And so this has been happening now. So by the time this episode gets released, we should have released these videos on YouTube.
Awesome. I'll include links on those. And this actually brings us full circle. So now you're helping to develop a video game platform that is also a hacking game.
Yeah, no, that was super fun. It was like a really actually fun fact, or like a bit flattering, was that the people who came up with this idea. I was not part of the group who came up with this idea originally. It was some other people like Gunvel and some other people at Google who started working on this, and then at some point they were like, oh, we should bring in like me for doing the like video production and video streaming and so on, since I had experience from Pwny Racing. And then like a few months later they get to know that I have actually been hired by Google. So it's like, oh well, problem solved.
You're like, how can I get paid to do this? And they're like, we will solve that problem for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, so the idea was to just bring me in for the event and maybe pay me a little bit or something. But then I got an actual job at Google. So then that sorted itself.
Yeah, you better watch out. Once CTFs finally makes it into the big leagues for esports, you and probably Jordan are going to be one of the first people that they throw up there to start casting these things.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
A stadium full of
people just yelling, hack, 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 hack.
Yeah, that would be crazy. We've actually talked about, we tried doing, so when we did the final Pwny Racing episode at CCC, we were trying to get a slot on one of the stages they have there. So we wanted to do the episode like on a stage, but we didn't get a slot in the schedule. So we just did it in one of these like villages or workshop areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Instead. Yeah. So would be cool though to do something like an event.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's that's. I could see it going there. The other side of that is always that it's so niche, and it's like, I think that's the thing that's impressed me the most about Pwny Racing, is trying to solve this problem of how do you make what's going on in these crazy complex CTF cybersecurity challenges that people can actually understand what's happening and what's going on.
I think it's niche, like you say, because in part because this isn't done a lot, right? I think the concept is very approachable, and a lot of people actually have some of the underlying knowledge necessary to kind of follow along, especially with a bit of good explanation. But there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem where you say we're going to do some CTF thing on stage, and people might immediately think, okay, are we talking about sitting there staring at a screen in silence for 20, 30 minutes? No. Even if things already exist that shows otherwise, not everyone knows about Pwny Racing, right?
And it's also a challenge to get, like, even getting participants was a challenge, because I mean, first of all, it's a niche area, so the number of people that the pool you have to choose from is not huge to start with, and then to say to these people that you're going to do this, but you're going to do it in front of a camera for like the whole world to watch. And a lot of people are understandably not at all comfortable with this. Because we all know that we make these mistakes, and we don't always have progress. And then you add some kind of like stage fright or so to that, you get stressed. Like a lot of people don't find this a comfortable experience at all. So yeah, that's also a challenge with this.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's almost like a weird social media type of thing, right? Where people, there's this problem with social media where people are curating their lives and only presenting the best versions, right? So everyone else kind of sees that. They only see the good parts. And so when now, like you said, people are maybe less hesitant or very hesitant to kind of portray themselves as they are, right? That they make mistakes, things happen. All those kinds of things are part and parcel of CTFs, but people like to, you want to curate your social media presence. Great. Well, yeah, this has been amazing. I mean, we really enjoyed chatting with you today, Carl. Hopefully, I forgot to say this, but I have a very, a special place in my heart for NorseCode. I'm kind of so the very long story, but I'm not by blood Scandinavian, but my mom was adopted by, and her family was Norwegian. And so, so I had lutefisk for Christmas growing up and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I say ufta a lot. And so, so I have the NorseCode has a deep place in my heart. And so I was very happy to see that going on, and I'd love to see it continue. And hopefully, someday Jan and I can make it out over there and say hi and visit everyone. And I think that would be super fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, we also, we liked it. We want to continue it, so we hope we'll get around to do that. So, and it was really nice to be on the show. Super cool.
Awesome. Cool.
Looking forward to seeing you at the top of more scoreboards.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe we can slightly push your team members to start playing more. Yeah, Jan demands to see NorseCode on the scoreboard. So
come on.
Yeah,
they got great
I will bring this message to
exactly. They got great T-shirts. They got great. What more do you need, really? Good logo, good website. I like the website. And it's also very much a minor point, but it's very frustrating to try to understand who all these teams are. So I very much appreciate that the NorseCode website says, here we are, and here's all the teams that we are composed of. So we can easily look at it and understand what's going on, rather than just some random name that's like a clever mix of other people's names that we have to somehow find out about. So I did appreciate that. So thank the team on behalf of us.
Yeah, no, I will definitely.
Cool. So thanks for joining us today, everybody out there. I'm Adam D, and you can find me on Twitter at Adam Dupay. He's Zardus. You can find him on Twitter at Zardus. And together we're CTF Radio, and you can find us online on YouTube or Twitter at CTF Radiooo with 3 O's. And you can send us questions through email at ctfradio@gmail.com. Again, 3 O's. And who knows, maybe we'll use your questions on an upcoming episode. So take care and happy hacking. See ya.
Happy hacking.